Thanks for tuning in again in today's new video. These stories are all original and sent to me by my subscribers. I hope you enjoy them as much as I did. And for the people who sent me their stories, you are the best. It is an honor to share it with everyone here. Thank you. Enjoy. My sister was home alone and she heard footsteps outside her window. It was 1 in the morning, so she thought it was one of us coming home from work. She got up to use the restroom and noticed the sensor light from the shed was on. Again, she thought it was one of us, but she decided to check out the front to see whose car was outside to figure who was home. She did not see any of our cars, so she ran out to the living room where the backyard door was and peeked out with one eye and saw footsteps on the snow leading to the shed. She ran back to her room and called the police. When the police arrived, they opened the shed to find a man covered in tattoos dead in there. Apparently, this guy was related to a gang shooting the morning that day. He was shot 1 time on his arm and 1 on his neck, which made him bleed profusely. I remember hearing the news and going straight home to see dozens of police officers surrounding my house. It was very overwhelming, and all of us were interrogated by the investigators. Nerve-wracking, but not scary until the police and CSI left the place. That was when things started getting super strange. Strange as in we think the person who died in our shed came back as a ghost who lingered there not knowing that he had passed away. 3 days after the incident, I was home alone at 1 in the morning in my room relaxing and touching my phone when I heard a loud knock from my window. It startled me and prompted me to get up to look around, but there wasn't anyone in sight. I decided to leave the room to turn on a few lights in the house when I noticed the shed light was on as if someone had triggered the motion light. I stared at the shed and the door was a little open, to which I assumed my dad or sister opened it earlier that day and didn't securely close it. The strong wind must have pushed it open. I observed the shed for a good minute when a black cat came out of the shed and sat next to the door, licking its paws like it had consumed an appetizing meal. That was the first time we saw the black cat. We had no idea whose cat it was, but it seemed to appear after the incident and liked to swing around. A couple of days after, my sister was coming home from her night shift and heard a person moaning in pain by the side of the house that was next to the front door.
"It hurts. Help me."
He was moaning repeatedly. Daunted and still scared by the experience of the dead person in the shed, she quickly opened the front door and ran inside, asking my dad if we heard someone moaning in pain by my room. We all ran out with flashlights, and my dad had his gun out, but there was no sign of anyone there. We looked on the security cameras to when my sister approached the house to when she came running inside, and we saw something. We didn't see anyone, but we did see something. By the dark area outside of my room, there was a big black object there. It looked like whatever it was waving something around while it was rocking its body back and forth. When my sister opened the door to the house and alerted all of us, the black figure changed its size and came out of the shadow. It was the black cat I told everyone about. It hopped the fence into my neighbor's backyard when we rushed out with flashlights. We still have footage of the event, and it's very ghostly. We showed to some family, and we all came to the conclusion that what we saw was the cat hiding in the shadow licking its body. That explains the waving of something around part while the body was rocking back and forth. The footage isn't clear, and because it was dark you couldn't really tell, but I believe it was something else. That's what the adults told us to not scare us when they knew well that it wasn't a cat. The cat stayed around the house for a while until my parents decided it was enough. My mom had a nightmare of the person that died in the shed. In this dream of hers, she was sitting on the sofa watching TV when she heard footsteps outside the yard. For some reason, she didn't look out to see who was there. My mom ignored it, and about 30 seconds later, she saw the guy that died in the shed out by the backyard door staring at her. She froze in terror and her heart dropped to her stomach. She had no idea what to do because the person standing outside had blood squirting from his neck. He gave my mom the death stare with 2 red bloodshot eyes. The guy opened his mouth and my mom could not believe what she was hearing. He was meowing like a cat. The sound was so bone-chilling that it woke my mom up from her dream. The scariest part was that she woke up to the cat still meowing from the outside. My dad had to get up and bang the window to scare the cat away. It didn't seem to scare the cat though, as it hopped a few feet and jumped to the roof of the shed and sat there. The next day, My mom was so disquieted and anxious by the dream that she went out to see a shaman. The shaman shook his head in disbelief at how long we let the cat stay. The cat was the guy who died, and he didn't want to leave this life, but he couldn't go anywhere, so his spirit was stuck in the shed. We explained everything to the shaman, and he came by the next 2 days to do a spiritual offering, and then burned a few incense sticks by the shed. We were told not to go in the shed for a week no matter what we hear. It was okay to go outside to the yard, just not in the shed. He gave us things we should do and shouldn't do, like don't feed the black cat or don't tell it to go away because it will trigger him. We were told to let him stay there and it will leave by the end of the week. My younger sister told us that she heard bangings by the shed at night that week when she slept, but she was so scared that she would not look out her window. My other sister said she heard few human moans here and there by the shed, but when she carefully listened to the human moans, it was just the cat meowing. After a week, the cat disappeared and we did not see it anymore. It sounds very fake, but the cat disappeared like how the shaman had said. The shaman came by the place to burn another round of incense by the shed, and we stopped experiencing these abnormal and scary incidents. We were traumatized for months and no one wanted to go in the shed. We would always go in pair if something was needed in the shed. I wasn't a believer of ghosts and stuff like that, but there are definitely some things out there that cannot be explained. Consider yourself lucky for not hearing or seeing them. For the last 2 years, while my aunt was working at home because of the coronavirus, she was working on a big project that had been keeping her up for a few nights and fell asleep on her keyboard. My aunt fell asleep and dreamed of my cousin Sean and his family. She was outside talking to Sean and catching up on life because they haven't seen each other for years when an airplane came crashing from the sky. The crash landed on Sean's house and his entire family was inside. Sean was crying, telling my aunt to help him locate his family. My aunt was trying so hard to dial 911 on her phone. However, no matter how hard she tried calling 911, she seemed to not be able to. Every time she tried, she would dial 912 or 811. Sean was crying, running all over the place, and my aunt just stood there in shock. She woke up from the dream to find herself on her work laptop. Worried and disturbed about the gut-wrenching dream, she called my uncle about the dream and for him to call Sean and his family to see how they are doing. She's really worried about them because dreams like this mean something bad is going to happen to either Sean or his family. My uncle later called Sean that night, but he didn't pick up. He then called a cousin that lived in the same block as Sean. My uncle was told that Sean's older son had hung himself that afternoon for a stupid reason. His son was only 16 years old. My wife broke down because she felt her dream was a sign, and if they called Sean earlier that day, maybe it would have prevented their son from suicide. 3 nights later, and my wife dreamt of Sean's son. He was packing his belongings in a suitcase in the same room where he hung himself. My wife opened her eyes and she appeared to be in this dark and cold room. Her mind was fizzing like she was on drugs, and so it took a moment for her to notice it was the room where Sean's hung himself. She was looking around to explore the chilling room when she heard a grunting, struggling noise behind her. She turned around to see Sean's son kicking off the chair that he was standing on, his body dangling around while his legs were kicking in the air, and his arms reaching for his throat. She was glued to the spot, terror-stricken, and closed her eyes in response. In what seems like an eternity, my wife opened her eyes to see Sean's son on the floor packing his clothing to a red luggage. They didn't speak a word to each other. His son packed the stuff that he needed and left the room like my wife wasn't there. She woke up in sweats and her feet felt so cold even when it was under the blanket. It was a very strange dream, one of the many mysterious powers of the brain. We moved from Sacramento to Wisconsin to work with my brother because his workplace offered my husband a good offer. We moved and first stayed with my brother and his wife for 2 months before we could afford a house. We weren't around the area, so my brother picked out an apartment for us. I didn't like the place, something felt off, but we were assured that it was a good price for a decent house. My oldest son also picked up on it because he refused to go down the hallway alone where the bedrooms were. My husband and I slept in the last room next to the restroom, and my son slept in the room adjacent to us. The first room down the hallway was empty. My husband would get up every morning at 6 to get ready for work. Once he left, I always cleaned and cooked for my son before he woke up. A few weeks into living there, I heard a little giggling in the hallway when I was cooking. I thought it was my son and went to get him up, but I walked into the room and he was dead asleep. It was eerie for sure, but I ignored it and kept the door open in case he woke up. I walked back to the kitchen and heard the giggle again, but this time it was directly to the left of me, which was the living room. I froze for a moment, and then rushed to my son's room and stayed there for almost half of the day. 2 weeks passed by and I was brushing my teeth with my son when my son asked me why there was a baby girl by the door looking at us. I turned back to see nothing and looked at my son. He looked at me and I called my brother, demanding him to come get us because the place was giving us negative vibes. Waiting for my brother felt forever. It felt forever because it felt like whatever was inside the house knew of our situation and tried to scare us even more. We were in the bathroom and I heard gigglings like whatever was laughing at us thought it was funny that I told my brother to hurry up to our house, which made me creeped up even more. I also heard footsteps and whispers around my son's room. The door opened and there was footsteps walking towards the bathroom where we were. It stopped outside the bathroom door and I heard someone rubbing their shoulders on the walls, then slowly walked to the living room. I don't know, I was so scared my mind was probably playing tricks on me. But part of what I heard has to be true because my son was crying the whole time saying he was scared of the girl outside. This house was haunted for sure and we moved 3 weeks later. It wasn't easy because my husband was only off on Sundays, so we had to stay at my brother's house. Have a wonderful day everyone. Stay safe and healthy. Wish you all a happy and good week.